So I just read this chat which blows my mind and I had to make a video on this. It says that 27% of Canadians have a HELOC on their home. Now first let's talk about what HELOC is. HELOC is home equity line of credit. Now I'll give you an example here. So let's assume that your home value is $1 million and you have an outstanding balance. So your mortgage balance that you have on your home is $500,000. Now the bank, when you go to the bank, they can, like in theory, lend you up to 80% of your home value, which is $800,000. But if you take that $800,000 of loan, you will now have a new payment which will be more than what your current payment is. And most homeowners, I'm hoping, would not want that. Now, if you look at practically, there are a lot of people who are doing that. It's stupid. And I'll talk about that in a bit. But, like a normal conservative homeowner who doesn't want to draw a lot of money from his home because it's his home and he wants to pay it down, they would not want to increase their mortgage to $800,000. So what they do is, what the bank would do is, they will keep your mortgage outstanding balance at $500,000, but they'll give you a $300,000 of home equity line of credit. It's secured against your home, but they only charge you an interest if you use that line of credit. So if you use $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, if you use $100,000 out of the $300,000, you are only charged an interest on the money that you draw from it. The interest rate can range between prime to prime plus 0.5. So it's not the same interest rate that you have your normal home at, let's say 4.5%. It'll be closer to prime, which right now is 4.95. And most of the times you'll be paying prime plus 0.5%. So now that we understand what HELOC is, 27% of homeowners, that's 1 in 4 homeowners, have a HELOC on their home. And of these people who have a HELOC, 58% have drawn from it, which means that these homeowners are actually paying interest on the HELOC. And it gets worse. It's not just $5,000-$7,000 that they've drawn from their HELOC. 10% of these have actually drawn over $100,000 and another 10% have drawn $50,000 to $100,000. And in Canada, HELOC balance stands at $171 billion. Just for context, that's 8% of the entire residential mortgage debt that Canada has. $171 billion. And by the way, that also means that all these Canadians are paying in all $10 billion every single year to Canadian banks in interest. Forget about mortgage debt. This is a whole new level of HELOC pandemic that we have in the country right now. So what happens? Why is it that so many people have HELOCs and a lot of people have drawn from it? Why is this debt so high? And the answer is renewals. I'm sure that a lot of you who are watching this video, if you have a mortgage, your mortgage will come up for renewal in next, like a few months. A lot of people are coming up for renewal right now, or it will come up for renewal in the next couple of years. This is typically how things will work. If you go to your bank or a mortgage agent and, ask them to renew your mortgage, they'll be like, for sure, but how would you like some more money from your house? And the best part, that's what they would say, the best part is that you would not even have to pay interest if you do not draw from this money. You get tempted and there you go. You have $100,000 of HELOC on your home. And then there are 2 types of people, or I should say there are 2 types of mistakes that people will do. The first one will be falling into FOMO. Someone in your circle, someone around you, or someone on YouTube is buying a lot of investment properties and you're like, you know what? I have access to $100,000. Let me buy an investment property, put the 20% down on an investment property, and then generates loads and loads of cash flow and retire young. But what you are actually doing is taking on long-term debt on your primary home, the home that you stay in, the home where you raise a family. You're taking debt on that to buy an investment property for a little bit of cash flow. And the worst part is that investment property is with $0 down. But yes, obviously you have paid the 20%, but that was borrowed money at a very high interest, right? It's prime plus, 0.5%. So it's 5.5% if you are taking it right now. You're borrowing money from your primary home and buying that home with essentially $0 down, which sounds amazing. And you'll find a lot of video, buy a home with $0 down, but it's not $0 down. You're actually borrowing. You're taking on more debt. You're taking on more debt on something which is your safety net, which is your primary home. And you know what? It's not bad. Everything is good if you're getting cash flow, if everything is paying off, you're putting that cash flow back into your HELOC, you're paying down your HELOC. Hopefully you are, if you are in this situation. Now that's not always bad. I'm for buying investment properties, but the problem is investment properties have inherent risk. What if the tenant does not pay? What if there's a massive expense on that house? Now you took some HELOC, some money from your primary home, you put it towards an investment property thinking that it will pay you, or a real estate agent, sold you, an amazing investment property that will give you $1,000 a month, and the tenant does not pay, and now you're in a much deeper hole, and you have a whole new mortgage on the primary home that you took HELOC from, and it's just a mess. You are in a lot of debt right now, and you're not actually making the $1,000 that everyone promised you. Now you might say that, Navjot, you are being too negative about this, and I'm not kidding. This is a very common thing that I hear. I get at least one call every single month where a lot of people are in this hole of taking money out of their primary homes, using that HELOC, paying a lot of interest on that, especially when the interest rates were the prime rate was 7.2% at one point. They were paying 8% on that HELOC to buy an investment property. And the worst part is that a lot of people actually buy pre-construction from this. A lot of people bought pre-construction condos, which we know, where it's, where it is at. It's one of the biggest mistakes. That's the first, one of the biggest mistakes that you can do is use the HELOC to buy a pre-construction where you don't even know. It's overpriced right now anyways. You don't even know whether that pre-construction home will appreciate in value, whether you'll be able to put it on rent. You don't know anything about that pre-construction, and some real estate agent just sold you a dream that this, is only at 5% down. Just draw from your HELOC, buy this, and then make monthly payments on this for the next 5 years, and then, you'll have some crazy dream, right? So I'm not saying that all that is wrong, but in this market, and especially if you take HELOC on your primary home, which you're supposed to pay off, right? I'll talk about that in a bit. And you do that to buy a dream which may or may not exist in future. And guess what? Everyone in this transaction became rich. Your mortgage agent becomes rich because they'll get you a HELOC. Amazing, they'll get paid on that. They'll get you, the mortgage for the new investment property that you bought. They'll make money on that. The real estate agent would make money on that. The bank will make money in the form of interest, or if you default, in the form of, whatever proceeds they get after they sell the home. Everyone gets paid except for you. You carry all the risk, and everyone gets paid on top of that risk. And then there are second kind of people. These are first kind of people who buy, we use the HELOC to buy, at least they bought an asset. And obviously you can win as well with that. I've seen a lot of people in a bull market, they win a lot and they multiply their money using HELOCs. I'm not saying people don't do that. But then there are second kind of people who actually spend money on shit. They use the HELOC to renovate their primary homes, which gives them no returns. Obviously it will give you a return, because the property value appreciates, but you will always need a roof. It doesn't matter if your primary home where you stay is $5 million and you bought it for $1 million. It's just good on paper. That number looks good on paper. It's not part of your net worth because it's not generating income. So a lot of people would use that money towards renovations, towards buying a car. A lot of people would use that to put a pool in their backyard because pools are cool and they increase value of the home. By the way, it does not. If you spend $50,000 on a pool, I've seen those, properties appreciate by $20,000, $25,000, at max $30,000. So it doesn't even cover the cost of putting that pool. And the reason is that a lot of people who are buying that home, they don't want a pool. It just looks good, but it's very expensive to maintain. And people who have pools would know that. So that's the second kind of mistake that people do, buying things that they don't appreciate. They are not even assets. And then, there's third kind of people, which I'll not even want to talk about, but I'll still mention it here so that you are not doing that. They borrow money from the HELOC to buy stocks, and that makes absolutely no sense. You are borrowing something at 5.56% interest to get a potential 8 to 10% return, make the 2% difference. Like you're paying arbitrage. You're guaranteed to pay the 6% interest on your HELOC. But there's no guarantee that you'll make 6% on any investment. So you are taking a guaranteed loss for a potential return which may or may not be higher. It does not make sense. Now here's how I use my HELOC. I have a HELOC on my condo, my first home that I bought. It's $98,000. I owe on that home overall about $350,000. The home is worth about $420,000, $430,000. Not keeping track because I'm not selling it anytime soon. However, the point of this is that $98,000, I just don't use it for stupid shit. I use it as a like an additional emergency fund, which I've never used, but I use it. In my mind, I segregate that as an emergency fund for my business in case something is to go wrong in my business, because I have a lot of expenses in my business. I have employees, I have fixed expenses, I have this office, I have this studio. So all these expenses, I just have that as an emergency fund in case anything goes wrong. And this is over and above my emergency fund, which is actually sitting in my business account as well. That's 10 months of my overall expenses in my business. So I'm very, very conservative there. So I'm not really using it, but in my head, I've just kept it, like for that. The second way I used my emergency, the HELOC was I used $20,000 from that HELOC towards renovations of our US property, and that money was paid off in about 6 to 8 months, because you can always refinance that, because you added value to the US property. You refinance that, you actually get more than $20,000, or at least you get $20,000, and you pay off the HELOC immediately. So it's a short-term gain that you make, a short-term thing. And that too, I did not use the entire $100,000. I used 1/5 of the money, so I was not taking a lot of risk. Even that can be a lot of, if you don't know what you're doing, even that's a lot. But I used $20,000 for less than 1 year, and I paid off the HELOC as soon as I was paid or the property refinanced. The point here is that I would never use a HELOC where my return of capital is over 1 year, which means if you buy a pre-construction using a HELOC, it will take at least 5 to 7 years. If you're buying a condo, 5 to 7 years for it to construct, and your return of capital is 5 to 7 years, and that too if you sell it. If you don't sell it, it's just permanent. The HELOC is you'll be paying interest on the HELOC whether the condo gets built or not for 5-7 years, till the time you actually sell the condo and then pay off this HELOC. And we don't know what the property values will be when you get the condo. I know I'm repeating myself, but HELOC is only used for short-term things that you want to do, and you are able to, the return on capital on those things, it should be assets, it should be something that generates income, or you should at least have a plan on how you're going to pay down the HELOC, hopefully with whatever you used it for my example, my US property, and you should have a plan of paying it down within 1 year. Else don't, because your primary home is not your checking account. It's somewhere that you live, you make memories, you raise your kids, and you pay it off as soon as possible so that you can have a mortgage and rent-free retirement. That's what a primary home is for. It's not a checking account.